Okay, so let's kick off. So you're all very welcome to week 4 of the Going Deeper course. Nice to see you all back. Myself and Kevin are here as usual in our house in Drumcondra. And yeah, it's nice to be back doing this stuff with you. So to say what we'll be doing today, so I'll just share my screen and you can have a quick look here. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to do the usual review of home practice and how we got on during the week. I'll remind you of what we covered in last, well, it was 2 weeks ago, wasn't it, in a moment. That'll include breakout rooms as well. This week, the theme is just sitting. So we're going to look at just sitting as a good dimension of practice to bring into our meditation. Yeah, so we'll be looking at that in various aspects. I'll introduce it and we'll do a short meditation to explore it a bit. And then we'll do a bit more on just sitting, perhaps after the break, and then we'll do another set, and then we'll do the home practice. So we'll do a short sit before I introduce the just sitting as well, but we won't be doing a 30 minute long session today in the same way as previous weeks. We'll be doing more shorter sits throughout the morning. Okay. To remind you of what we did it wasn't last week, it was 2 weeks ago. So we were exploring the hindrances, and I'll remind us of what those are again in a moment. Working with distractions, working with hindrances, general antidotes, specific antidotes. And we did a mindfulness of breathing sit and we looked at dhyana and absorption. So that's what we covered last time. Just to remind you of all those, so that these are the hindrances. So there's sense desire, which is preoccupation with pleasant experience. Sorry, there's something around here. And each one has a water image. So sense desire is like water mixed with dye. There was ill will, which was anger, irritability, and that's like water heated to a boil. Restlessness and anxiety, which is like water stirred up by wind. That's, we don't really need to have restlessness and anxiety explained, I'm sure. Sloth and torpor, which is lack of energy, and it's like clogged up water overgrown by algae. And then doubt and indecision, which is like muddy and dirty water that's very hard to get any clarity in. Yeah. And I'll just mention these next ones briefly because we've covered them already at least twice, but general antidotes: turn towards it with kindness, feel it in the body, name it, acknowledge it, let it go if you can. Yeah. And then we also looked at the more specific antidotes, like consider the consequences of just sitting there in distraction, cultivate the opposite of each of the hindrances if that's useful, having a blue sky, a sky-like mind, just saying no or suppression, and retaining the bigger perspective, just taking solace in the bigger perspective. Yeah. And then finally, last week, we looked a bit more at absorption and we looked at different levels of consciousness. So this is an important teaching, that we try and move from distracted awareness, where we're enmeshed in the 5 hindrances, to access concentration, where we mainly have to work more with sinking and drifting, to full absorption, which is the dhyanas. So that's the map of how the mind gets absorbed in meditation. And we're trying to continually move from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. Yeah, so that's what the creative mind does in meditation. Yeah. Okay, and then the home practice was to keep meditating every day, obviously. If you haven't already, and if you can, increase the length of your sit. And notice which hindrances you're doing and work effectively with them. And then notice when you get absorbed and allow that to unfold. The main teaching when you start to get absorbed is to relax into it, get yourself out of the way and allow it to unfold. And then keep a journal to notice the patterns of how your mind works. So that was the home practice for the week. Hopefully you managed to meditate every day. Hopefully you got on well with that and were able to work effectively with your distractions and so on. Okay, so are you ready with the groups, Kev? Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the breakout rooms and we'll aim for 4 people in each room. There might be some rooms with 3 or some rooms with 5, so it's hard to be exact in Zoom. So what I'd like you to do, as always with the breakout rooms, is I'd like you to first of all remember what room you're in, so what number room you're in, because if you drop out, it'll be easier for us to put you back into that room again. And maybe if one person could just take on doing the timekeeping straight away. So just one person say, right, I'll do the time. And Kevin it'll be 12 minutes long. And if there's 4 of you, that'll be 3 minutes each. So Kevin will send notifications every 3 minutes. But if you're in a room with 3 or if you're in a room with 5, you might need to do the timing a bit different, obviously. So if you're in a room with 3, you'll have 4 minutes each. And if you're in a room with 5 people, it'll be, you know, just under 2.5 minutes each. So just make sure that everyone gets a chance to speak. And what I'd ask you to speak about is, how did you get on with your meditation for the last couple of weeks? And were you working with distractions effectively? And did you notice absorptions as well? Okay. So Kevin, if you want to push the button. And we'll see you in a few minutes, guys. Okay, great. Welcome back, everyone. Just waiting for people to come back from the rooms. If you want to ask any questions or comments from the week, from the group or from your practice at home, do write them in the chat box. So we're nearly all back. Is that everyone back, Kev? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so you're all very welcome back. Do write any comments or questions you have in the chat box, because it'd be great to hear some of your comments or questions. That's often what makes the course. That's often the most interesting part. Great. I hope the groups went well. I think people. I'm finding on this course and the other course, people are really liking the groups, actually, because it's just nice to chat to other people about your practice in a way that you often can't at home. So hopefully you enjoy that. Okay, so let's just give it a minute to see if there's any questions coming in. In a minute, we're going to do a short set. Okay, so why don't we, if you're not typing, why don't we set ourselves up for a meditation set? That's okay, Eilish, just your message there, that's fine. Great to hear, Mike, that you're all getting off-cushion benefits. That's good to notice. That's where you really start to appreciate your meditation practice, I think. Ashlyn was away for 2 weeks and meditation didn't even enter your head. And that's true. Once you're out of your routine, it's a lot harder to. Even the weekends can be, ironically, even though you have more space often, harder to meditate because you're out of your daily routine. You can forget to do it or just get squeezed out. Sylvia enjoyed her chat with Helena. Great, good. Yeah, Madeline, yeah. Only 2 days, Ashlyn. Yeah, that's great. That's very good. Great to hear you did it every other day. Great, thanks for that update, Derek, on your group. Yeah, Bernie was away for a few days and missed a week of meditation and felt its absence. Lesson learned. Sam is finding it hard to square meditation with time in the gym and breakfast. Yep. That's the challenge, I'm afraid, Sam. I don't have any easy answer for it. One thing, just to go back to what Bernie said, is that when you do start to get into it regularly, you really do notice when you don't do it, then you start to see, my mental states are getting a bit grubby again, or a bit unpleasant again. So it's when you start to really notice the benefits often is when you get a practice going and then you stop it for a day or two. I'm not saying you should stop it for a day or two to experience that, but it can be the case that you really notice it then. Theo said that they're losing the joy of practice, something more of an obligation than a pleasure. Yeah. So often when you start off meditation, Theo, you have a beginner's mind where everything's very fresh and new, and then it starts to become more mundane and everyday. And I think what you need to do to get the joy back is to, I think, like do courses is a good thing to do. So you keep getting input on meditation, read some books every now and again. There's a very good book called Change Your Mind. Maybe Kevin, you could share the link for that if that's okay. And so on. I think you just need to try and keep things fresh, try different approaches. If you're just listening to the guided meditation, for example, maybe go to the one that's just bells and try something, be a bit more experimental with how you engage with the breath or with metta and so on. You just need to keep it fresh. You need to keep your beginner's mind going at all times. Yeah. And also, I mean, the big one for me is to get on retreat, actually. So every now and again, I just need to get away on retreat to keep my meditation really fresh. And happily, we are running a retreat next week, so you could join into that if you wanted, where you get more input on meditation and Buddhism as well. If you're not into Buddhism, you can still come to the retreat anyway, obviously. But there will be some very good meditation input on that retreat as well, and a chance to do more meditation with people as well. Madeline agrees with what I was saying earlier. She wasn't meditating every day, so some days she really craved to sit. That's good. It's a healthy desire, a healthy desire, which is great to hear. Okay. Okay, so why don't we just do a short sit now? So we're just going to sit for about 10 or 15 minutes, and it's really just a body scan. So set yourself up comfortably. So about 10 minutes of a sit. So settling into our posture, settling into just being seated here. Making whatever adjustments we need to make so we're upright and alert and at the same time relaxed. Tuning into our surroundings, the sounds we can hear. A sense of the space around us and the people in the building beyond. Tuning into ourselves now more. So beginning with our feet in contact with the floor, our sitting bones in contact with the chair or the cushions. Feeling the shape of our legs and our hips and our pelvis and our feet. Becoming aware of our spine and our back and our shoulders. Becoming aware of our arms and our hands. And fingers and thumbs. Becoming aware of our neck and throat and jaw and face. the whole of the head. Becoming aware then, bringing our awareness down into our stomach and abdomen area. Then resting in the heart area, in the chest. Just spending some time being aware of the breath, being aware of the body breathing. Just being with the breath. Each breath in, each breath out. And now letting go of the breath and just sitting for a few moments. Just being with whatever arises and passes away without making effort to do anything particular other than that. Being with sounds, being with sensations, being with feelings, being with emotions, being with thoughts, letting them be there, arising and passing away. Alrighty then, bringing the practice to a close, starting to broaden out your awareness to take in the room around you, the space you're in, the sounds. Reintroducing movement in your own time, and bringing the practice to a close in an appropriate way. Okay. So sit at ease if you want. I'm going to be talking for about 10 minutes or so. Okay, great. So I wanted to start with a bit of a story as a way of introducing just sitting. So apparently there was a monk, a follower of the Buddha back in the Buddha's time called Sona, whose Sona means golden. And not sure why he got that name, but anyways, he was a very earnest practitioner. And he was particularly fond of walking meditation. So in the day, the monks and nuns would obviously sit like we sit, but they'd also do walking meditation, walk back and forward mindfully as a way of meditating as well. It's a nice thing to do when you're doing a lot of meditation, just so your knees don't get too sore and to ease the pressure on your body. But it's a nice practice in its own right as well. But anyways, he was doing so much walking meditation that his feet were getting hurt and he was bleeding in his feet. So the Buddha took him aside and had a little word with him about being too willful and making too much effort. So apparently Sona, before he was a monk, was a musician, a lute player, a guitar, you could say. And the Buddha, it showed the Buddha's skill in teaching that he was able to relate to Sona in terms of images that he used, that he would be used to. So he asked Sona, when you have your lute, or we could understand it as a guitar, when you have your lute, when the strings are too tight on the lute, what happens to the sound? And I'm not an expert on guitars, but I think the story goes that Sona said, well, the sound won't be correct. And the Buddha said, similarly, when the lute strings are too loose, what happens to the sound? And again, Sona said, well, the sound doesn't sound right. So the Buddha is highlighting to him that the strings can't be too tight or too loose, or else the music won't sound right. And the teaching was obviously that in terms of effort, if we make too much effort, our meditation won't sound right, you could say. And if we don't make enough effort, our meditation won't sound right either. Yeah. So if we get too willful in meditation, too strict, too driven, it'll hurt our meditation practice, you could say. And if we don't make enough effort, if we just vague out and be lazy in meditation, we won't get the right music either. It won't work well either. So we've been looking at the more active elements of meditation practice so far. So we've been looking at actively engaging with the breath, actively cultivating metta for people. I mean, I've talked within that of receptivity as well, obviously. But this week's class is on just sitting, and that's much more directly bringing out the more receptive element of meditation. So just sitting is the really receptive, just being with your experience kind of aspect of meditation. And just as a warning beforehand, I mean, we'll explore just sitting over the morning. It is a bit subtler. It is a bit subtle, and I found that people don't always get it straight away. So if you don't feel you get it straight away, don't worry about it. And you might have questions which will come up straight away, but I might not answer till the end, because it's a slightly trickier way of teach. It's a slightly trickier thing to communicate in some ways than the more effortful side of practice. Yeah. In some ways, it's also really simple, because when you, in terms of just sitting, the practice is you just sit there. Yeah, you just sit. That's it. That's all. We could just leave it at that and call it a morning now, you know. But obviously, we'll need a bit more instruction on that. So let me just share my notes then, and I'll launch into it. Okay. So, okay. So just sitting. Yeah. So as we've already covered in our course, it's really important in both courses, actually, I think, to end a period of the mindfulness of breathing or a period of the metta bhavana with a period of just sitting. Yeah. So always spend a few minutes at the end of your meditation practice just sitting, like we did even there in that short sit. And so what we do when we just sit, as we said, as we've learned on the introductory course, is we let go of the breath, we let go of metta, and we stay in our posture, we stay without moving, and we just sit. Simple as that. We just sit. We don't do anything apart from kind of opening out to the fullness of our experience, just dwelling in awareness, you could say. In a way, anything you say about it almost falsifies it in some ways, because it turns it into a thing. So it's very hard to speak about it, but we really just sit. And it's important to balance the activity of the sit with the just sitting at the end. One of my friends, a meditation teacher, talks about how, you know, when you're doing the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana and so on, and other practices like that, it's like having an Indian curry. So those practices, the mindfulness of breathing, the metta bhavana, are like the sauces, and the just sitting is like the white rice that you need to eat the sauces with. You know, the meal will be a bit unpleasant if it was just the sauces. You know, so I like that as an image. I don't know if that works for you, but the just sitting at the end of the session does give us a chance to really absorb all the effort we've made. And it also helps us to integrate the effects of the practice. So if you didn't do the just sitting, you wouldn't be able to carry the benefits of the practice back through the just sitting back into your life, you could say. The just sitting kind of helps us absorb all of that. And it also helps us transition from that state of mind back to a more active state of mind where we're walking around again, you know what I mean? So, and if we just jump up, we'll probably cause ourselves to be quite jarred, actually. I remember being on retreat where I neglected just sitting and would jump up and run off and have my breakfast. And after doing this for a couple of days, I started developing really bad headaches, actually. So if you find that you're feeling a bit weird after meditation, or a bit woozy or a bit headachy, it might be that you're not giving enough time to, like, just sit, absorb, and transition back to the state of mind of moving around in the world. And as your practice goes on, as you do more mindfulness of breathing and metta bhavana, you might find that you also want to increase the period of time that you do just sitting for at the end. So one of the things I'll be asking you in the home practice this week to do is to do more just sitting at the end. So let's say you're doing a 40-minute sit. So you might have been doing 3 to 5 minutes of just sitting at the end. This week, I'll ask you to extend that to 10 minutes. So you have 30 minutes of mindfulness or metta and then 10 minutes of just sitting. Or if you're doing 30 minutes, do at least 5 minutes of just sitting, if not a bit more, say, for the mindfulness of breathing. It's good to keep the stages to 5 minutes each of the mindfulness and the metta practices, but do a bit more just sitting, or maybe sit for longer, for 35 minutes, with 10 minutes of that being just sitting. Yeah. So in a way, it's not really a practice at all. In some ways, it's not really a practice in that you just sit. So you don't have to make it any more than that. It can be quite hard to get that initially, and you can feel like you're not doing something right. But what you're doing when you're in just sitting is you're simply aware of whatever's there. Yeah, that's all. That's the only effort that you're making, is simply to try and be aware. And if you drift off, you drift off. And then when you come back to awareness, you're back to awareness again. Yeah. And there's no real object, like the breath is the object in the mindfulness of breathing, or metta is the object, or the other person is the object as well in the metta bhavana. So there's no particular object in meditation, in the just sitting rather. It's not to say that you won't bring your attention to different things. So when I'm doing just sitting, and we'll do this in a few minutes, I might at times be aware of my legs or my body, and at times be aware of sensations, and at times being aware of the feeling tones of things, and at times being aware of a sound that emerges, and at times being aware of the breath again maybe, and at times being aware of a thought that arises and passes away. But what you're trying to do in all of this is you're trying to have that blue sky attitude where whatever you're aware of simply arises and passes away. You're aware of it, but without being engaged with it, without being, caught up in it. Yeah. And so you're just open to the present experience, and you're just left with awareness. And sometimes people talk about this practice as pure awareness. I don't think it's a great term in some ways, but what it's trying to get at is there's just an awareness that is free of getting involved in things, you could say, free of conceptualization about things. So you're just trying to be, you're just trying to sit. You just try and be with what is. So we just sit. We just sit when we're just sitting. We just sit. And in terms of why just sit, well, I've already mentioned that it's very useful. Not just useful; it's necessary at the end of a meditation practice. It's necessary. It's vital. If we don't do that, we'll leave ourselves in a bad way. But also, when we do that, we'll carry the benefits of the meditation we've done all out of the sit. But it's also useful in itself. So it can be useful, again, maybe doing that, you might find this when you do the extra 10 minutes at the end of your regular sit. It can be very useful for countering striving. So if you're very driven and you strive a lot and you're very forceful about things, just sitting can be a really good antidote to that. So you can't strive in just sitting. The only thing you strive for is not to strive, in a way. You know what I mean? It's a very good, it can be quite, it can really be perplexing for the mind, actually, initially. And this is why it can be quite challenging to get your head around this. You feel like you should be doing something. And if you feel like you should be doing something, well, you just sit with that feeling of needing to do something, and you just sit with it. And you allow it to unfold in the clear blue sky, if you see what I mean. It can also be really good to give us a really deeper awareness of ourselves. So I found the just sitting practice a really good way of deepening my self-awareness. What I mean by self-awareness is just how aware you are internally of the different aspects of your being, your body, the feeling tones, your emotions, your thoughts. So I think just sitting is a really good practice for tuning us much more deeply into our internal experience, into the internal mind. For me, it brings me into it often drops me into a deeper state of spaciousness internally. So I really love it as a practice, actually, well, even though it's not really a practice, as I said earlier. So it can really give us a deeper awareness of ourselves. Often when we're doing the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana, naturally enough, we're busy doing that. And that will deepen our awareness of ourselves. But this is just really just sitting with yourself. And that can have a really positive effect, even though it can be quite challenging as well. And you can just see just all the persistent distractions playing out and seeing, God, this is what my mind is like when it's really busy. And you can just see if you can let that be and kind of open out into a deeper sense of calmness and spaciousness. Yeah. So I find it a really good practice for developing a deeper awareness of oneself as well. And then just one last thing. So when you're just sitting, it's good, and we'll do this now in a moment in the first just sitting session that we'll do. It's good, like it's often difficult just to sit. So what we can do to start with is to root ourselves, ground ourselves in the foundations of mindfulness. So being aware of our environment, being aware of our body, our feelings, emotions, and thoughts, feeling tones. So just really, we're going to spend the first few minutes of the next meditation just rooting ourselves, as we normally do actually in meditation, in the foundations of mindfulness, the applications of mindfulness that are so basic to all of meditation, so fundamental to all of meditation. And awareness of the body, I think, is particularly crucial in just sitting. If you're completely lost in just sitting, if you're really not sure what you should be doing, come back to awareness of sensations of the body and just sit with them. And if you're really lost, you can come back to the breath again and follow the breath for a while. And then see if you can just let go of that a bit more and just let go into just being with wherever the mind wants to go and be aware of, yeah? One way it's put is that the focus in just sitting, if there is a focus, is breath. B-R-E-A-D-T-H is a broad kind of awareness of the foundations of mindfulness. And it might be that you kind of become more aware of particular parts and then you come back out to a broad awareness again. It's whatever way the mind wants to move, whatever way you feel you need to move in that practice. And one of the key attitudes is that whatever arises in the practice is okay. Whatever arises in the practice is okay. So whatever arises, you just sit with that. You just sit with whatever arises. So if you get bored, you just sit with that. If you get frustrated, you just sit with that and allow it to unfold. If you get really joyful, you just sit with that without getting involved in it. If you vague out, you try and just sit with that. You try and come back to awareness and just sit with the tendency to vague out and be aware of it and see how it plays out as well. If you get really frustrated and angry, you just sit with that. And if you get restless, which is probably what will happen, it's quite a common thing when you start doing just sitting, you get restless. So just sitting with restlessness as well. Okay. Let's see. But beware of laziness. Yeah, so that's important too. Don't just sit there drifting and thinking that you don't have to do anything anymore. In some ways, you don't have to do anything except just sit. But that isn't important except you just sit with your experience. So watch out for laziness as well. Yeah. So there's a couple of questions coming in now. I'll just finish the sharing. Okay, so a big question from Owen. What is the difference between feelings and emotions? So I should have put in feeling tone there, is what I meant by feelings. So feeling tone, you might remember from the beginner's course, is where any sensation you have, a body sensation, an emotional experience, a thought, will have a feeling tone of pleasant or painful or neutral. So that's what I mean by feeling tone. In English, we use the words feelings and emotions pretty much interchangeably, but Buddhism is a bit more precise. There isn't actually a word for emotions in Buddhism. We talk more about sensations, feeling tones, and volitions. So you have your sensations, your hand on you feel your hand on your skin, and then that has a reasonably pleasant feeling tone for me right now. And then my volition might be to do more of it, to have more of that thing. So that's how we tend to talk in Buddhism. So what you're trying to do in just sitting is you're sitting with sensations, you're sitting with whether things are pleasant or painful, and you're sitting with emotions, you're sitting with thoughts, whatever. You don't have to do all those at once, but whatever is primary in your awareness, you just sit with that. Fiona, so should you try and have an empty mind? No, I don't think you should necessarily. I think what you're trying to do is just sit with whatever's in the mind. Yeah. So just sit with whatever's in the mind. And if your mind empties, that's fine. You just sit with that. I mean, I'm wary of the term empty mind because there's always interesting things going on. If you mean empty of thoughts, then I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, that's a nice thing to have happen. But if you have, even when you have a mind empty of thoughts, you can go deeper and deeper into the physical sensations, the feeling tones, energy moving in the body. And I don't think, I mean, Buddhist psychology has a saying. It says the mind is always hungry. The mind is always hungry. So you're always aware of something. So you never really have an empty mind. It just means you have an empty mind of strong emotions, thoughts, and so on. And but what you do have is a mind full of the rich interplay of energy in your body, perhaps, Owen asks, could you explain vague out? So what I mean by vague out is just you're off drifting, daydreaming, basically. You're sitting there, okay, I'm just going to sit. I'm not going to make any effort. I'm just going to sit. And then you kind of drift off into what you're going to have for lunch, and you spend the next 10 minutes thinking about the nice sandwich you're going to make. That's what I mean by vaguing out. Yeah. So if you're doing that, you're not really just sitting, you're just planning. Yeah. You're just eating your lunch in your mind. Yeah. Okay. So let's do it, because in a way, the more we talk about it, the more we're probably going to confuse the issue. So let's set ourselves up for meditation. So making sure we're comfortable in our posture, making sure we're upright, making sure our arms are supported, making sure we can sit comfortably for the next 10 minutes or so. When you're ready, closing your eyes. So let's just sit with the foundations of mindfulness, the applications of mindfulness that we know. So let's just sit with whatever sounds we can hear, allowing them to be there. We can allow them to come to us and we can hear them. We don't have to actively go out and listen to them either. Neither pulling them towards us nor pushing them away. So it's a bit of a skill, just hearing, rather than actively going out to grab them. Seeing if we can just sit with them. Remaining centered in ourselves can be helpful. Just sitting with what we can feel in the body. Maybe feeling the contact of our feet, our legs, our sitting bones, with the cushions, with the chair, with the ground. And in a similar way to the sounds a few moments ago, can we just sit with these sensations? Neither pulling them towards us nor pushing them away. Just being open to them. What else can we feel in the body in terms of sensations? Maybe there's a feeling in the stomach, in the chest, in the hands. Just being open to this, just sitting with this. Allowing it in to our awareness without grabbing it. What's predominant in your physical experience? What's most vivid? What's most loud, you could say? Can we just sit with this? Can we experience the feeling tone of this? Is it pleasant? Is it painful? Is it somewhat neutral? What we're experiencing, what we're just sitting with in the body? without getting sucked into the usual dynamics of pushing it away or pulling it towards us. Can we just be open to it? Can we just sit with it? And now opening up to our emotional experience, just sitting within, just sitting with our emotional weather, the arising and passing away of whatever emotions, volitions, desires are there in the heart or wherever you experience them. It might be in the stomach, in the throat. Softening into your heart, allowing yourself to feel what's there and just sitting with it. Without any judgment, without pushing it away or pulling it towards you, just sitting with it. If it's very strong, you can breathe with it. You can lean into it with the breath, but otherwise just sitting with it. You might also like to notice if it's pleasant or painful, and just sitting with this. And then just noticing thoughts, letting thoughts arise and pass away, if there are any. If not, you don't have to go seeking them out. It can be helpful to remain grounded in your body, in the feeling tone of your experience. Allowing thoughts to arise and pass away in the clear blue sky. Really, it's probably best to do this with a good sense of your body, a good sense of your physicality. So maybe again, just coming back to just sitting with the body, just sitting with sensations and their feeling tones. And then just the last few moments, just dwelling, just sitting in whatever way you wish. And when you're ready then, broadening out your awareness to take in the sounds. And this time we can actively listen to the sounds to broaden out our awareness if we need to. Becoming aware of the room, the building, the people around us. When you're ready, reintroducing movement and bringing the practice to a close in an appropriate way. Okay, so why don't we take a short break now? So let's be back and ready to go in 5 minutes. That's 11:42 by my clock. And please do try and be on time if you can, because we have to. We're going to spend a bit more time just sitting, so I want to make the most of the time we have. If you have any questions about the practice there or any comments while we're on the break, do feel free to write them in, and I'll try to answer them after the break. So we'll be back in 5 minutes' time. Okay. Okay, so hopefully everyone's back. Miriam is just asking, because of the retreat next week, is there still the course? Yeah, the course will be going ahead as normal. It will be a bit of an overlap, so you might, if you're on the retreat, which hopefully most of you are, or many of you are, we might have to miss one of the retreat events, but that morning. So I think there'll be probably a half an hour teaching session that you might miss, but we'll be doing our course anyway, so you'll get good input. So yeah, we're going to go ahead with the course next week. Yeah. And just to say that the retreat is on next week, so it'd be great if you wanted to come on retreat. So a retreat is a great opportunity to go much deeper into your meditation practice. Kev, could you share the link to with the full HTTPS thing? And yeah, so you could check out that. Now, where did I leave my? There we go. So you can see all of our events. We really the main event we're promoting at the moment is the summer retreat, and we will have new courses starting after the summer retreat, which will be going up soon on the website. But you can check out all of it on DublinBuddhistCentre.org. And just to say as well, if you obviously the courses I've mentioned is being done on a donation basis. So if you're in a position to give. You can go to DublinBuddhistCentre.org/donate or PayPal.me/DublinBuddhistCentre. So it'd be great if you could consider giving a standing order, a donation or a standing order if you can. Okay, so hopefully you got on okay there with that session. If you have any questions, do send them in to us. Let's see, what's next? Okay, so I really enjoy that just sitting there, I have to say. I'd be curious to hear how you got on with it, but it can be, like I said, it can be a slightly tricky practice to get your head around. When you just sit, you're just sitting. Yeah, you're just sitting. And again, I mean, some people do it as a practice in its own right, but the main way I'm recommending is to do it is at the end of your other sessions. If you've ever experienced that thing where you're doing meditation's really like, you're working away, and then when someone rings the final bell, suddenly it all goes really well then when you start to relax into just sitting. So just sitting can be really, really good in that way. It can help us really experience the fruits of the meditation practice. Bernie found it very relaxing. That's good. Okay, so then just to say a few more things about just sitting, and I'm not going to put these notes up on the screen, but so as I said, it can be good to do at the end of your meditation practice. It can be useful to do at the start of your meditation practice as well. If you're particularly flustered and not quite ready to go into the mindfulness of breathing or the metta bhavana, it can be good just to sit with the foundations of mindfulness and just sit for a little while to let your mind settle again. Another place that's just sitting is really good is off the cushion. So if you want to, you could just sit looking out a window and just sit with the birds landing on the bird feeder outside the window as they are here, or looking at the wind in the trees swaying in the wind. That's something I love doing on retreat. You just sit there and you just watch the trees swaying. So you're just sitting again with the visual this time, as opposed to, say, the internal or the ears that we were doing earlier on, the listening. Also, at times I found it useful when there's a lot going on emotionally, when I'm having a very emotionally intense time. If you're having a lot of grief, for example, it can feel just too much to do the metta bhavana sometimes. And instead, it can be more useful just to sit with your experience, and it can be helpful to have a light awareness of the breath as you're doing this as well. And then finally, another place you can do it is if you're doing it on retreat and you're doing lots of mindfulness breathing and metta bhavana. What we tend to do, for example, over a week-long retreat, when we're away on residential retreat, is we tend to bring in more and more just sitting. So we might start out in the morning sessions, for example, by doing a mindfulness of breathing, a metta bhavana with a leg stretch and just sitting. And as the week goes on, we might just then become mindfulness or metta, just sitting and just sitting. So you can do more and more just sitting the longer of the other two practices that you're doing. But you do need the other two practices there to support it. If you just do just sitting, you'll just end up just drifting a lot. Yeah. Okay, a few last things then. And again, do send in questions if you have questions about it. The main thing is just to have an attitude of interest in your experience, in whatever's going on, and openness to whatever's arising in your experience. It really is just sitting with whatever emerges in meditation. You can look for qualities of well-being and vitality and energy. That's something I enjoy doing. You can just sit with those. I mean, I know I say it's just sitting, but it is okay to look at certain things as well, choose to look at some things over others as well. But so you're just sitting with a sense of vitality and energy. You can sit with your eyes open. Sometimes it's best to do this practice with your eyes open, or half open. So you can have a very soft focus. You're not looking at anything. It's more just that you have a soft focus on what's in front of you. You tend to look kind of down. It's said that you kind of look down at the ground a meter or two ahead of you. Yeah. And this is what Zazen is like. If you've ever come across Zen Buddhism, this is a kind of Zazen style. It's very good to stay in touch with your senses, what you can see, what you can smell, what you can hear, what you can taste, what you can touch. Your effort is such that you're neither letting the mind, your awareness, get too tight or too loose. You can feel things and acknowledge things that emerge without getting caught up in them. And a large element of it is just relaxing into what's there, relaxing into your body and your mind. And you can simply rest in your heart center with a sense of open awareness. Yeah. So that's a few more pointers, and I'll lead us through another little bit of just sitting now in a moment. Sam is asking, how do you square resisting vaguing off with just sitting? And he wants me to repeat something there. That's fine. So in terms of vaguing out, or vaguing off, let's see, what could I say about that? It's okay. Like, thinking is okay in just sitting. Everything is okay in just sitting. What you're trying not to do is to get caught up in it, in the story of it. So you might be there just sitting and noticing, my mind is turning towards what I'm going to eat next, my lunch. And that's fine. So you just sit with that. You allow it to unfold. It can unfold itself without you particularly getting involved in it. And then it can disappear again. Yeah. So what I mean by vaguing out, really what I mean is getting involved in those stories. And so you start planning your lunch and you forget that you're meant to be just sitting. And so you're off somewhere else. That's what I mean by vaguing out. So it's not that the thought is the problem itself, or the emotion, or whatever it is. It's more that you get lost in it. So what you're trying to do is feel those things without drifting off into them. So maybe that's what I mean by vaguing out. Or another way of vaguing out is where, with just sitting, a danger of it is the danger of it is that you think, you tell yourself you're just sitting, but actually you're just drifting off into stories. Yeah. Instead of pure awareness, you have impure awareness, you could say, to be a bit facetious. So, so instead of just drifting, you're just sitting. So you are definitely aware. And if you wander off into unawareness, that's okay. When you can't really do anything about unawareness until you become aware again. So when you become aware again, you come back to just sitting, and you come back to just letting things unfold in your experience. And a good thing to do is just to feel it again in the body. So if you're drifting off into, or if there's some kind of emotional story emerging that's intense, well, see if you can work with the physical or energetic feelings in the body around that. In terms of, just to repeat what I said about just sitting on retreats, as you do more mindfulness of breathing, so if you were doing a mindfulness of breathing and a metta bhavana sit every day, you could probably also sustain a just sitting, where you just do just sitting for 30 minutes. If you aren't doing those practices each day, you probably wouldn't be able to just do it as a sit in its own right. You'd probably be better off keeping it to doing it at the end of your existing sit. And on retreat, you're typically doing 4 or 5 hours meditation a day. So you can do that. You can sustain that awareness in just sitting. But without it, you probably just drift off. Ailish, yes, we will be on the same time next week for the week 5 of the course. Even if we're on the retreat, you can still come on that. So, and then Fiona says, so vaguing out is not being present in the moment. Yes, thanks. I probably should have just said that, Fiona. Yep. And Kevin points out as a difference between, yeah, that's good. So being in the driving seat of your thoughts, or just watching them from the side of your road. So you're kind of lost in the action of it. Okay, so why don't we set ourselves up, and we'll do another period of just sitting now. So setting yourself up for meditation, and this time we'll sit for about 15-20 minutes. So again, just settling into your posture, making sure we're upright and alert. It's good to have the support of a firm and upright posture, even when we're just sitting, or indeed, especially when we're just sitting. Deciding if you want to close your eyes or if you want to keep them half open or open but very softly focused. Of course, you can change your mind and close them or open them later as well. And once again, just tuning into the foundations of mindfulness, but firstly, maybe spending some time noticing sounds, noticing surroundings, allowing whatever's there to come to you. Just sitting with whatever's there. Tuning into our body, opening to what we can feel in the body. Opening to the heart, the emotions. opening to, or at least noticing what thoughts are there. And actually, what we'll do now is we'll do a period of the mindfulness of breathing for the first few minutes, and then we'll let go into just sitting. So why don't we allow an awareness of the breath to emerge right now? The breath at its own pace. Without grabbing it or controlling it. For the next 5 minutes or so, we'll just follow the breath. So perhaps doing the third stage of the mindfulness of breathing. If you really need to have a count, you could have a count for the first few minutes and then letting that go. So a few minutes of the mindfulness of breathing. Particularly being aware of the breath in the body. And if we've wandered off, just acknowledging that, doing what you need to do to come back again to the breath in the body. And now letting go of the breath. Just letting the breath fade into the background. And broadening out our awareness to just sit. Just sitting with whatever's there. Our body, our physical sensations. The feeling tones of those. The heart. The energetic body. Being open and curious. Just sitting with a sense of well-being and vitality if we can. Allowing whatever's there to emerge and pass away. Emerge, evolve, and pass away without getting caught up in them. Just sitting. And if you're confused, just sitting with what confusion feels like. If you're bored, just sitting with what boredom feels like. If you're frustrated, just sitting with what frustration feels like. If you're happy, just sitting with what happiness feels like. So just sitting with whatever emerges in your experience. And if you're really lost, you can lightly follow the breath for a few moments again before seeing if you can let it go into just sitting. remembering to just sit with whatever's there without getting lost in thoughts or emotions. If you're getting very lost in thoughts or emotions, you can particularly be aware of and just sit with the body and the senses. And now when you're ready, starting to broaden out your attention once more, actively listening to the sounds in order to bring the practice to a close and to become aware of what's around us again. In your own time, starting to reintroduce movement. And in your own time, bringing the practice to a close in an appropriate way. Okay, so if you have any questions about that, there's at least one come in already, do send them in. So hopefully you found that of use. So Anne asks a very good question. Do you tend to work with the hindrances in just sitting? So if you're in a strong hindrance, like if you're just there doing ill will very strongly and you just can't let go of a story that you have from how someone did you wrong yesterday or something like that, see you, Miriam. You might need to work more traditionally with those hindrances. So you might need to do a bit of metta and so on. But really what you're trying to do with just sitting is using the blue sky antidote, where you're just sitting with them, trying not to get invested in them and let them play out. So that's kind of how you work with the hindrances in just sitting. In a way, there are no hindrances in some ways. This is where just sitting is hard to talk about. What you're really just trying to do is let them just play out without being caught up in them. So it's the blue sky method. But if they're strong and you need to use more specific antidotes or some of the other methods that we talked about last time, feel free to do those. You do what you need to do, basically. Okay, so one last couple of things about, and this is an important little note before we talk about the home practice. So we've talked about just sitting, doing it at the end of your mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana. What I think the reason it's good to do just sitting like this and to spend a bit of time on it is that it's also an attitude that we should bring into our regular practice of the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana, not just at the end, but during it. So while we're doing the mindfulness of breathing, we might ask ourselves, can we relax more and just be with the breath? Or do we have to, well, control it, direct it, be forceful with it? So what's the minimum amount of effort that you can make and still be vividly aware of the breath? And that's a kind of a bringing a just sitting attitude to the breath in the mindfulness of breathing. So you might need to be more directed in the mindfulness of breathing, but for many people, you might need to just be with the breath more and less controlling of it. And the other, in the metta bhavana, you might just want to just sit with the person in front of you. You know, I've talked about this before. So you might like to bring that attitude of just sitting into the metta bhavana as well. So you're just sitting with this person, you're not trying to do anything with them or get anything from them. I mean, you are trying to cultivate metta towards them, obviously. But you could try and bring a just sitting attitude more into the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana as well. One meditation teacher told me once that 90% of meditation is letting go. So 90% of meditation is letting go, particularly, I guess, letting go of the things that get in the way, which are things that we're actively doing usually. Yeah. So we actively do sense desire. We actively do ill will and so on. So 90% of meditation is letting go. Don't take that too literally because it might get you into trouble, but you know what I mean. So try and bring a more receptive attitude into your meditation during the week. So a couple of comments then. So Roshin said, I found it so much easier to go deeper in my meditation during just sitting than in either mindfulness or metta bhavana. Yeah, that's not uncommon. That's not uncommon. And at the same time, you might not have been able to do that had you not been doing the mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana up to now. So there is a temptation to just do just sitting all the time, if that's your experience, but you do have to keep doing the other practices. But it does allow you to go a bit more deeper at times. Yeah, I felt grounded, yet Sam was saying, yet allowed to wander to a degree. When thoughts came and went, I had the image of flying a kite, but still holding the string. Yeah, that's a good image, Sam. Thank you for that. So you're watching the kite fly around, but you're not the kite, I guess you could say. Just like Kevin was saying earlier, you're not driving the car. Okay, so we're nearly out of time. So let me just talk about the home practice. So the home practice is to keep meditating every day. Do more of just sitting, as I've said, at the end of your mindfulness of breathing and the metta bhavana sits. So you might want to spend a bit more time just sitting and a slightly less time doing the mindfulness of breathing. But again, don't forget to try and do longer as well. And also bring a more receptive element to your mindfulness and your metta practices. What's the minimum amount of effort you need to make to stay with the breath, to stay with the person? That's a good question to ask. And at the same time, you do all that without getting too slack as well. Remember, if the guitar strings are too loose, you don't get any sound either. You know, in some ways, the sound's even worse. And then the last thing to say is to keep a journal. And so the journal is to notice patterns of how your mind works and how you get on in your meditation. So I really encourage you to keep a journal. It only has to be a sentence after each meditation. Yeah, it only has to be a sentence. And the last thing to say is, if you can help the Buddhist Centre, just to remind you, dublinbuddhistcentre.org/donate. Okay, Kevin, could you make me the host again? And another comment there, someone else says, I find it you drift much more easily in just sitting. Yeah, so that's the other end of the equation. You can drift much more easily when you're in meditation, when you're in just sitting. Okay, that's the end of the course. So I'm just going to end the recording and the live stream.